Welcome everybody. We're here in Baku welcoming David Coulthard. He's here with us. He's been so kind to come here for a couple of days and to see how the things work in Baku. I mean, he's been here before a few times. He's been there 2 times. Once for the Red Bull show run, and the second time was for the actual Grand Prix, where you usually travel with the crew around the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is your 3rd time in Baku. So just generally your feelings about Baku, and what do you think about the track and everything else?
Well, I was lucky enough, as you know, to come here a few years before the first Grand Prix. So you get to see a city before it gets a flavour of what Formula One can bring. And from where we're broadcasting, we have a great view down over the paddock, the pit lane, where I would be doing my broadcasting now with Channel 4. And so, you know, you get to see now the sort of pre-build-up to the Grand Prix season. So one thing that's absolutely clear, and you know this, but maybe the people that are watching are not so aware, is that you know, this is really a city that has great history, but has a vision for the future. You just need to see the architecture that's around this constant development, and this is absolutely where Formula One I think lives and breathes, because we have a great history in the sport of Formula One, but its lifeblood is technology and development and looking for opportunity, looking for the next performance gain. So I think that what I can say, and again, you're aware of this, but the drivers very much enjoyed the challenge of this racetrack. There was a few of them still buzzing after the first practice. And so therefore, in terms of coming to a country that doesn't have a culture of motorsport, but this is the building blocks of, you know, making sure that future motor racing star maybe is coming from this country.
Yeah, I mean, there is a way to go until that, but I mean, still, yeah, it's quite a challenging circuit for the drivers as well. I mean, it's got all the elevations, uphills and downhills. It's got all the crazy turns where the margin of error is so tight that you cannot really do anything. You cannot make a mistake, and it's something that you loved back in the days. That's something that you told me, that you like the tracks where you cannot make a mistake. You have to be very precise with what you do. You needed to really concentrate on your racing. I think that's roughly what the drivers see here. And by being so, what do you think is the most interesting part of the circuit from the driver's perspective? I mean, you've been driving for 14 years in F1, I mean. If you were driving in this circuit, what would you say your favorite part, your favorite turn of the circuit?
Well, I think it's sort of 2 circuits bonded together, because when you go into the Old Town, everything from turn 8 is really tight, really sort of, let's say, Monaco in its flavour. Elevation change, as you mentioned, goes from narrow sections to very more open, incredibly high speed, all the way through to, is it 15, 16 at the top of the hill before you drop back down?
Yeah, 15 at the go down.
And then you've got everything along the front, along the Caspian Sea, is wide boulevard, incredibly high speed. You know, speeds of, I think, around 220 miles an hour down into the first braking zone.
Yeah, they did 377. I think Bottas did 377 during the qualifying.
Yeah, so that would have got his attention. Yeah. So you know, you've got this sort of conflict of Monza high speed and Monaco low speed, and they're sort of married together. So I think that's why the drivers were pretty much you know, wide-eyed after the first practice session, because a simulator will give you a certain feel. But of course, there's no consequence in making a mistake on a simulator, where there is on the racetrack. And we could see, much to my surprise, and I'm sure a number of other people, a track that we thought Lewis would really shine on. He struggled. He struggled to find form, and
he was surprised, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, I heard some of his comments before the race. He was a bit skeptical about the race. I mean, they tried it on the sim, and then obviously the sim doesn't show you everything that's around it. I mean, I think the first versions of the sim, they were so rough, there wasn't even the mentioning of the barriers, like how close they were to the track, and that there is no runoffs, and I think that was one of the reasons why he was a bit skeptical. Yeah,
but in the end, it was probably one of his more difficult weekends.
Definitely.
Trying to master the track, and but all of that sort of, you know, incident and accident and controversy that happened during the Grand Prix, where he wasn't sure what engine setting he was meant to be in, then it means that we can remember this Grand Prix.
Definitely so, yeah.
And you know, you're perfectly placed for, you know, year two. Drivers and teams know what to expect.
Yeah. We hope they'll risk more.
Yeah, they were maybe a little bit cautious to start with, but you know, we've seen it with other countries that didn't have a history of motorsport there, but over the course of several years, then you build that following, you get the local following, you get people who go, okay, well look, I didn't really think about Azerbaijan as a destination.
True,
I'm a fan of Formula One. There's a lot to see here.
Might as well try.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll see that in the country as a whole, because you know, genuinely the welcome we've had has been fantastic, and you know, this is a well-oiled machine as a city.
Good. And I believe you haven't been to the testing in Barcelona, but what do you generally think about the new cars, about the regulation changes, the wide tires, the crazy fins they have at the back right now, and everything else? What do you generally think about the new cars? What will it add to the show, and how does it generally work now? Well,
where others will say, you know, we're listening to the fans and we listen to this group and that group and all the rest of it, you know, I'm a fan, but honestly, I think we should listen to the drivers, because if they're happy and excited, that reflects what the cars are like to drive, and we as fans then can feed off their energy. So the last couple of years, it's been very clear they're not so excited about the tyres, they're not so excited about the lift and coast. And
the degradation of the tyres was a bit
yeah, that was a bit shocking. Yeah. So we've got a car now which has got wider tyres, more mechanical grip, increased aerodynamic performance, and the drivers are buzzing. And that energy is what I'm picking up on, and I expect to see that reflected in the way that they talk about the cars when they're driving in Melbourne as the cars evolve during the course of the year. You know, whatever the performance gap is from Melbourne to Melbourne, by the time we get to the last Grand Prix of the year, they'll have evolved another second in performance, if not more. Maybe even more, because it's the beginning of the cycle.
So far, it looks like it's going to be more, right?
Yeah, no, what I meant is that, you know, of course they're like, you know, 3-4 seconds faster than they were, but from Melbourne through until the last Grand Prix, they'll develop again in the season.
Further.
So then the pace is going to be, you know, approaching the fastest ever Formula One cars. So the technology that we have, we know is incredible, but again, we don't, well, certainly I don't, in the broadcast go, well, here the Mercedes engine has won the Grand Prix, and then as a footnote say it was Rosberg driving. What we say is Rosberg won the Grand Prix, or Hamilton won the Grand Prix, and then we mention the car. So I think we have to remember the order in which we celebrate the sporting contest.
Yeah, true.
This is a true team sport. You know, the driver cannot hold the trophy without a team.
True. But at the same time, the people are interested in the drivers.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they want to have their heroes in front of them, and they want to praise the drivers for what they do. So it's
exactly.
It's kind of a both ends at the same time. Yeah. So talking about this, if what do you think? If you could implement any change in Formula One right now, what do you think the first thing that you would do?
Well, I would personally, want to take the point of view is that how much of the technology do we need to interest the manufacturers, because they are here to showcase their skills, and you know, not many Formula One engines end up in road cars, but the technology and the essence of the development end up in the road cars. So, you know, I think it's important that there is a road relevance, but I don't think that should be the dominating factor in creating what Formula One stands for as the pinnacle of motorsport. So I think that what I would like to see, and therefore I suspect other fans would like to see, is close racing amongst a number of teams, where you feel that it's not just about the inter-team battle. It's important to have two teammates which are
It's more than
close.
Just manufacturers. It's closer to the crowd, where they can actually know what this technology stands for, as opposed to just hearing the abbreviations, and so they understand the technology better, because at the moment it's so complicated. It's really hard to follow it, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of technology there, but I have grown up around technology. I've exploited technology in my career, but really I don't jump in a road car and think about all of the moving parts and inside the engine. Where I would think about is the functionality of what I can touch and see. So again, I know I don't represent the greater public, but I expect there's a lot of people like me that they only ever look under the hood of the car when they're maybe buying the car or they're changing the oil. The rest of the time, you live inside your car, so it has to be the things that you touch. So I think we have to remind ourselves of what Formula One as a sport and sport in general. It's an escape from reality. It's the bringing together of people. It's a celebration of technology, yes, but that technology is there to facilitate the fastest racing cars around the circuit.
Yep.
There's many other one-make formulas. There's many other closer racing championships, but they don't have the global audience and appeal of Formula One because they're not the best. And Formula One does represent the best, and I think we just need to find the balance between celebrating that but not losing sight of the sporting contest.
Definitely so, yeah. I totally agree with you, can't agree less. We were talking about the drivers before. So talking about the drivers during the actual pre-season testing in Barcelona, you weren't there, but you definitely know everything about it. Who impressed you the most out of all the drivers and all the teams? So just if you pick one driver and one team, who do you think did the best job in Barcelona so far? I know it's not the best indicator, but just...
Well, you can certainly say, in terms of observing how people have settled into this new regulation car, it's more of a challenge for someone like Bottas coming from one team to another, and he's had a very solid winter of testing, which would suggest that maybe he can really, push Lewis. That's the big question, because we know Nico was able to beat Lewis on his day, but over the course of the year, more often than not, Lewis was the guy that was able to exploit the performance maybe a bit more. So we're all curious to know how Bottas will manage that challenge. Ferrari seem to have picked up some performance, and in terms of having a more competitive season, that's an important part of what we're doing. I think one of the best inter-team battles potentially comes from Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen, because two relatively young drivers, both incredibly talented. And
they do work together, right?
They do,
they
absolutely.
Actually work together as a team.
Yeah, they do, but they haven't been winning regular Grand Prix, and I think that the pressure on teammates gets much higher when you're actually winning. If you're battling over second and third and things like that, then the expectation of the team is slightly different than when you've got a chance of winning. So every time you have a winning car, the relationship between the teammates
gets worse.
is more under pressure, because the stakes are higher.
Talking about that, have you seen the quote from Lewis that the relationship they have so far with Valtteri is better than in these 2-3 months, whatever they had together, is better than he ever had with any teammate that has ever been with. It looks like it's well, to start with, it looks like it's going to be a good marriage.
Yeah, well, I think everyone's familiar with the expression, the honeymoon period. Yeah. And if your honeymoon's not good, then it doesn't bode well for the marriage. So they're on the honeymoon, and let's see how it works out. But you don't have to be at loggerheads with your teammates. Clearly, you have to work with them. There has to be a respect. But in the end, you're not going to be happy for your teammate winning.
True. They're really competitive, and everyone wants to win. And who do you think will actually win in this season? It's really early to say, but do you think there will be a change where there's going to transfer from Mercedes to someone else, like Ferrari you just mentioned? Or if you were if you're a betting man, who would you put your bet on?
Well, I'm not a betting man, so it's very difficult to put myself in that situation. But the safe money is that Mercedes, because of the engine power unit advantage they've had, then that regulation hasn't changed, and the potential for them to develop is just as great, arguably, as any of the other manufacturers. So, whilst we've been observing Renault improve the power unit and Ferrari improve the power unit, Mercedes can still do the same thing. So they go into it the favourite, but it does seem that Ferrari are more competitive generally. Red Bull have got a great record of developing during the course of the year, so wherever they start, that they add performance fairly regularly. I think that it's those three that really have the chance to win, and then the rest. Williams had a fairly strong winter of testing, but they don't have the same resource. Paddy Lowe has officially started at Williams, and I saw he was trending on Twitter.
That's going to be interesting.
Yeah, exactly, but it shows the power of the technical leader. But I just hope that we have some really close battles throughout the field, and of course there'll be a fastest car and there'll be a slowest car. We've lost Manor during the winter, which is obviously a shame for Formula One. We have a new era of management in that Bernie Ecclestone will not be at the helm as we head into the season, as new form under the ownership of Liberty take their position at the boardroom table. And we're all curious, I'm sure you are, and all of the other, all of the nations that have a Grand Prix, to see how that builds the platform that Formula One has already established.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I want to take you back to those questions of the engines. I know back in the days you raced in a completely different types of engines. They were in hybrid, they were naturally aspirated most of the time. And do you think, I mean, the next engine change regulation is in 2020?
Yeah.
That's the time. And do you think there is a chance that they will actually go back to the naturally aspirated V8s, V10s, V12s? I don't know.
Well, I saw Jean Todt, who's president of FIA, say that that's not the direction that they would take the sport. And, you know, there'll be solid engineering and strategic reasons not to do that. But again, if we're just looking at how much do we celebrate what goes on below the bodywork, we don't really do many technical features on it, because naturally the teams want to restrict access to that, you know, performance advantage they may have. So we can say Mercedes have the best engine at the moment, and I think that is you know, a fairly common belief in terms of outright performance. But you know, Formula One is you know, also part of the appeal of Formula One in the past was the soundtrack, was the noise and the energy. Because you know, if a jet fighter goes over, it's loud and it's raw, and in the past Formula One was loud. And I would like, you know, I enjoyed very much the normally aspirated era, but I accept that the future is not normally aspirated engines. You know, the future is a fully electric or hybrid derivatives. But I think that a bit more noise would certainly be good.
Definitely so. I mean, we as a promoter, we do get I wouldn't call it a complaint, but we get some feedback from the general audience that, well, back in the days you couldn't stand next to an F1 car. I mean, you would just go deaf after a while. So now it's a bit easier. It's a bit more straightforward. I mean, yeah, well, it's a bit of both. I mean, yeah, but still there is the hybrid part of it, which is the technological advancement, which is taking it back to the question of technologies, actually celebrates that technology, the pinnacle of technology, queen of motorsports. So it all comes together as one piece. So I mean, there is a debate about that for sure. But now again, taking you back to your racing days, what was the most memorable race you ever had? Like, what if you would pick one, which will be the one?
Well, races that stand out, then sort of late 90s, early 2000s was probably my most competitive period, and Magny-Cours 2000, I had to work quite hard to win that Grand Prix, because I dropped behind Barrichello in the Ferrari and then Michael in the Ferrari, and I had to come back past them. So those who remember that period will remember I wasn't entirely polite with my hand signals to Michael, which of course I apologised at the time. But it was a lot of energy and a lot of emotion went into delivering that result. Winning Monaco the second time was something really special, because I led from the start and had to control the pace and keep out the barriers and all the usual challenges you have there. British Grand Prix, of course, is something that was special as well. But if I actually look at the historical Grand Prix that I grew up watching, then you know, I was able to win the Italian, the Belgian, the British, and the Monaco Grand Prix. So you know, in terms of the period that I was a race fan before I was driving, then they were important events. But the truth is, any Grand Prix victory is a good victory. So you know, I was able to win in Australia and places like that. So you've got to be in a good team and great group of people around you, and make sure you do your job when it's your chance.
So it's just basically, I mean, you've won a few Grand Prix. So it's basically when you do win it, it's just you just remember it for life, and you wouldn't say that it's better than any other one to win. I'm sure Monaco is special, though. I mean, every driver wants to win in Monaco. It's just like a legacy that it stays there forever.
No, but I do. The first time I won Monaco, Michael broke a suspension when he was leading, so I inherited the win. I think likewise the first time I won Silverstone, it was the same. So, of course, a win's a win. But if you're being true to yourself,
you want to win at a competitive race.
You want to win by knowing that you have exploited your opportunity to the best of your ability. And if someone else has had a technical problem, it's not the same. You know, so I'm old-fashioned in that respect. I'd rather win with everyone being on track. So my proudest moments as a driver are the ones where my teammate was standing beside me on the podium, and say Michael, because if I had Mika and Michael beside me, or Kimi and Michael, you knew that you had two better drivers ultimately than I was, but on that day I was able to beat them.
Yeah. So who would, out of those guys that you've just mentioned, who would you say was your favorite rival? Let's put it this way. Who was
the hardest rival?
Arguably
Is your teammate, but as a non-teammate, Michael was incredibly hard to race against because he redefined what was the limit sometimes. But Mika and I were teammates for a long time, and I enjoyed that working relationship because it was hard but fair. Kimi, I was already a generation older, so we didn't really have the same connection. So we were teammates, but not really in the sense of really working hand in hand to develop the package. The package was pretty good when he joined, and he just did his thing. So I had more of a connection with Mika.
Great. And so out of your teammates, I mean, you've had 3 teammates all in all? You were with...
I had a few. I had Damon Hill, I had Mika Hakkinen, Kimi, and then at Red Bull I had Tonio Liuzzi, I had Christian Klein, Robert Dornbos.
Okay, many.
I hope I'm not missing anyone.
Who was your best friend out of all of them?
It was different thing. At Red Bull it was a building phase, so I was kind of like Uncle David in comparison to the young drivers. So we were competitive against each other, but it was also, I was wrapping up my career and they were trying to build their career. So the relationship was different, but my longest relationship as a teammate was with Mika, and that's probably the guy I connected with most. With Damon, we were a generation apart.
Yeah, he was at the end of his career when he joined as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that's
so
fine.
Would you say Mika was probably one of your best friends in the F1 world?
No, we weren't friends when we were teammates.
From the F1
Today we're
world.
Friends, but not when we were racing.
No, you were racing.
It's very difficult to be really close friends with a teammate because you want to beat him and he wants to beat you. But I wasn't in it to find a really good friend. I was in it to try and be successful. If you can have friends, then it of course makes it more enjoyable.
Yeah, and you mentioned the fact that you made unconventional hand gestures to Michael. So what was your generally funniest moments during your period in F1? If you can think of one that was the funniest.
Well, I was always looking to lighten the mood, and as much as a very serious business, if there was an opportunity to say something that just lightened the scenario, and so there was always something silly I was saying along the way, but either publicly or privately with the team. The most bizarre situation I think that I was in the first time Mika and I raced for McLaren at the Malaysian Grand Prix, the heat was so shocking. It was such a hot, humid day. I remember both of us doing our debrief after first practice, sitting in our underpants in the debrief room surrounded by the engineers, because we were both red and just sweating constantly because we hadn't really prepared for, the next time we went back or the next day we had ice buckets to put our feet in and our hands in, and we'd frozen towels and everything to bring your core temperature down. But on the first day we were just completely unprepared, and so a debrief in your underpants is a bit strange. Actually, a debriefing.
Yeah. I mean, do you have a photo of that?
In my mind,
I would want to see that photo with you and Mika just sitting there.
We were fit back
in the garage in your underpants.
Bizarre.
That would be that would be quite an interesting photo to see. And so right now, can you name a person who's still at F1, whether it's an ex-driver or he's still a driver, or he just works with F1? Who's your really close friend? If you pick one person.
Well, I spend a lot of time traveling and in and out of the track and everything with Martin Brundle, who was racing at the time when I started. He was teammates with Mika actually and with Michael. And coming up through the formulas, he did some great battles with Senna and Formula 3. So that's someone that I spend a lot of time with and is a good friend. Jensen was someone that I used to spend quite a bit of time with as well. And there's so many of the younger drivers now that, because I'm living in Monaco and I've helped facilitate a little bit their transition to moving there, then you build up a relationship. But I respect the fact that they're all racing and they're all focused, and in their mind they're all mega superhuman individuals. And as they mature and pass through their careers and come out the other side, they'll realise that they're just normal like everyone else, but they've had a talent that enabled them to go and have some fun behind the wheel of a racing car.
And everything else that surrounds it.
And everything else that goes with it, yes, exactly.
And there was a conversation about possibly changing the format for the Formula One weekend. I mean, they've tried different things with the new qualifying sessions, with the race. I mean, pretty much stayed the same, but other than that, there were different brainstorming ideas on how to possibly make it better. What would you think? What would you suggest, just in terms of the weekend format? What would you think would be a better choice?
Well, I would look at it in the short term in another way, which is what do we need to do to engage the younger fans, of which there are many, and if we can engage them, then those younger fans will very quickly become older fans, and we move with them. You know, I have an 8-year-old son who has just started karting practice, says he wants to be a Formula One driver, but doesn't watch Formula One because I'm not there. I'm at the Grand Prix. And you know, I see how he interacts with different games, you know, Minecraft, when they can build these worlds, and I like to see how they can take their mind on a journey. Well, clearly, if we made that about building somehow a Formula One car or some sort of virtual world of racing,
bringing them the cars closer to fans and the drivers,
having them connected during the broadcasts and everything. Then, so I would work at it from that point of view first of all, and then look at how do we make the actual spectacle, the show, better. So there's a whole world of fantasy called Hollywood, where we pay to go and watch movies and not documentaries, but you know, box sets and things like that, which are complete. You know, they may be based on factual, historical information, but for the large part, they're cultivated to give us entertainment. Yeah. So that's one part of a fantasy world that we all enjoy, and you know, we know that James Bond gets the bad guy, kisses the girl, and saves the planet. And even though we know that's the formula, it's still nice to watch, even though you know the basis of what's happening. So I think that we shouldn't be too proud that, you know, we can learn a little bit from the entertainment world, but equally I do think that we should remember the DNA of Formula One, which is, you know, humans and their machines pushing to the limit of what's physically and creatively possible. And whilst you're trying to allow people to do that, you need to obviously control a little bit the performance so that they don't become undrivable or unsurvivable if you have a crash. But equally, on the safety side, I think that we have to remember that life is dangerous. Something's going to kill us in the end, whether it's old age or whether it's an incident or accident along the way. Everybody's life ends in tragedy. So let's not worry about that too much. Let's celebrate the opportunity to... And
Formula One is relatively safe nowadays. I mean,
well, it is, and life is relatively safe nowadays. You go back a couple hundred years ago, people were dying at a much younger age. You know, we live longer today. So things are getting better. There's no question about it, but as far as I know, it's still going to end the same way. So it's not necessarily how long you live, but it's the quality of life that you're able to have, and we're incredibly lucky. In the world of Formula One, it's, you know, detached from the real world of some, you know, horrible situations.
Of driving a car.
Driving a car. But let's just, you know, if we accept it for what it is, and you know, a celebration of all of that creative spirit, let's make it as entertaining as we possibly can.
Yeah. Now the reason behind it was some of the, I mean, you know, last year Brazil was quite successful from the TV viewers' perspective, and there is a school of thought that thinks that the average attention spans of people is now quite short. It's not as it used to be before, so they don't concentrate on the show that they watch on the TV for as long as they used to. And what Brazil showed us, that when you have the red flag in the middle and you have all the interviews in the middle, and then you restart the race when you have another start, which is also great, that you actually get more viewers. So I mean, they use similar scenario in GP2 and GP3 where they have 2 races, and the second race they shuffle the grid a little bit, and then they put up the second race. Do you think something similar to that can be applied in Formula One sometime in the future, that just to adjust sort of to the progressing world, to what it is now, it's not the same as it was 20 or 30 years ago? I mean,
well, absolutely. I think that all of any idea, you know, 'cause that's one example, and it's backed up by data, because the audience, I know from television, it did actually improve during the course of that race. You know, as people maybe on social media are saying, wow, this race is exciting, have you seen what Verstappen's doing, have you seen, you know, Raikkonen spin, and all of the different things that were going on. So there's no question that has a positive impact. But it was also wet, and I remember Bernie Ecclestone saying probably 15 years ago he wanted to put sprinklers, and at random moments.
That'd be a good idea.
Yeah, and everyone thought he was crazy, but actually, in terms of spectacle, it was a good idea, because then you have to react to that.
If it's random, like the
and
weather.
then no one knows, or maybe the fans decide, you know, what lap the water gets put on a corner. So
through the social media.
Through the social media.
You can like it more, than all of a sudden the rain appears.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things that you could suggest. So I'm not against, you know, any of those if they are using data from the past. I would rather go that direction than change the qualifying format like we did. Even though we knew what was going to happen, we still needed to blindly allow it to happen and lose the spectacle of what was actually the celebration of the fastest car at the end of the session, for us to realize that it didn't work. And that, to me, didn't use any science to it. It just went, okay, let's do this and it'll make it better. Well, it didn't. It made it worse.
Yeah, we're trying different things to make things more interesting, and then obviously some things work, some things don't. And taking us back to previous years when you were racing, but you're still in the paddock. You're a regular in the paddock. So if you compare the paddock now to the paddock 20 years ago when you just started racing, how would you compare it? What's the difference now?
Well, it's more difficult to get in the paddock, so there's less people in the paddock. You know, anyone that's close to Formula One will know that getting access, and usually, you know, in some cases the answer would be, you know, everything's allocated, the paddock's full, and you look around and it's like, you know, being, you know, someone like Shanghai, which has got a huge paddock, it's like someone's rang the bell to evacuate the place, you know. So I think that I understand the business, and you can't have everyone there when you have Paddock Club and you have grandstands and things that need to be sold to help facilitate the business of Formula One. But equally, usually if you go in a restaurant and there's no one there, it doesn't feel quite the same. Even though the food's the same, it doesn't feel quite the same. And I think there's a middle ground between having too many people and having not enough to create the atmosphere. And I would rather be on the edge of too many than not enough, because we all know how that feels.
Just to make it busy. Just to
you
make
feel
it
the
like
energy. We're social animals. That's why social media is so popular, because we like to interact. And some people are the haters who just like to tell everyone that they're crap at everything they do. And some people are the lovers and they like to celebrate everything. And that light and shade is what makes humans come together and like each other or hate each other or whatever the feeling they have. But I think that what sport continually shows is it's irrespective of gender, religion, race, it brings people together in a moment of sporting greatness, and we want to see that.
Definitely, so it's a good environment to communicate with people and to see what people are capable of. I mean, the athletes. About the paddock, by the way, I just remembered our last year's paddock. It was relatively busy in comparison to some of the other races, maybe because it was a little bit smaller, it was a tighter space.
That's right, you've got a much tighter space. And
so it looked buzzing, it looked quite full.
And you need that, it creates the atmosphere. And then we can't see on the camera here, but the paddock's just down behind us. We're sitting in one hotel, and there's another hotel framed at the other side, and you know, it sort of feeds into the paddock, and there's this feeling that the city is living the Grand Prix experience, and that's something that I've always been very conscious of in places like Melbourne and Monaco and Montreal, where we're not going to a sort of circuit out in the middle of nowhere and then travelling back into the city. where sometimes
you live in the circuit.
You're living within the environment. You're picking up on the curiosity of the locals. That some that will be, instant fans. Some that won't like it. But again, that's the light and shade that is life.
Yeah, definitely. I totally. Are you a big fan of the city races in general?
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't very good at many things in Formula One, but I was actually quite good on the street circuits, if I can be less than modest there. So for me, I would have seen it as an opportunity rather than some circuits I went to and I knew I was going to struggle at.
It's taking you back to your concentration levels. I mean, with all the street circuits, you have to be aware of the barriers.
Sure. Yeah.
You're so close to them most of the time. And now I'll take you to just a couple of personal questions. I mean, when you were the driver, you had to keep a very strong diet. I mean, obviously you're tall, and you had to be in the same weight category as all the other drivers who are more often than not are shorter than you. Yeah. Was there like a type of food that you missed the most? That's a question that's coming from our fans, actually. Yeah. Is there a type of food that you missed the most?
Well, it was always a part of my life from an early age in karting. I was very extreme in that, during karting, then I would control my weight I'd weigh myself, and if I was too heavy, then I'd make myself sick. So that's not healthy, but that was being tall, I had to be at a certain weight to be competitive. That obviously became easier when I went into cars. But I was around 72, 71 kilos. I'm 78 kilos now, so I've put on a bit of weight since I retired. But this feels natural for my height. And a lot of the taller drivers, Hulkenberg and I know Jensen and guys like that who struggle to be light enough to be competitive. I remember having this conversation with Jacques Villeneuve where he thought that the driver weight should not be included in the car. And I said to Jacques, well, surely you want to beat me because you're a better driver, not because you're a midget. And he said, no, I've been made this size, so I think I should have an advantage. And I was like, typical small man.
And how does the weight add to the lap time if you...
10 kilos is about 3.5 tenths of a second. Let's say on an average track, 3 tenths, on an extreme track, maybe 4. So it's a significant part of
every
performance.
Every 10 kilos is 3 to 4.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
0.3 to 0.4 seconds off the lap time.
That's right, exactly.
That's quite
huge.
It's huge. That's massive.
Yeah.
That's what.
When you consider the difference between a great racing driver and an average racing driver is maybe 1/10 of a second per lap, then weight is just a huge influence in the overall performance. Yeah.
Tell me ballast.
Yeah.
If you were in some world thinking of starting an F1 team, what would you call it? That's another question from our
Wow, I have never thought about starting a Grand Prix team, so I've never thought what a name could be, but some of it would be, I would go through a process of trying to find a name which is exploiting technology, vision for the future.
DC Motorsports?
No, that because I'm almost 46, so my journey is definitely going on the other way. But you'd want something somewhat inspirational, I think, that clearly defines what the sort of mission statement is.
Give me a name.
Oh, I can't think of one right now. I need to, I'll be typing into Google inspirational, visionary names and seeing what comes up. So someone will be able to do that now, and then
we'll just wait for your feedback on that, and we'll just post it on our webpage saying, okay, you thought of a name, it's going to be called that.
Yeah.
And the last question from our fans again: what kind of music do you listen to when you're in the car? Type of music, favorite bands, or?
I tend to listen more to the radio in the car, so a sort of combination of music and news to sort of keep me informed of what's going on. So I wouldn't say I specifically put on an album when I'm in the car, but I will when I'm traveling, which I travel a lot. So like, Ed Sheeran's just launched his new album, so I've downloaded that and I've been listening to that a few times. But it's the same with any, whether it be Coldplay or, going way back, I used to go and see people like Iron Maiden, a heavy rock band, and sometimes I revisit their music for some of the lyrics and the journey it takes me on. So it really depends how I'm feeling, but lyrics are very important to me to be in the music rather than just, a good beat is nice, but if you're going to listen to music, I want to be taken on a journey by the lyric, and If I'm feeling, traveling away from the family, I'm usually feeling quite emotional because you're leaving your family to go off and be selfish, watching Grand Prix. So then I'll listen to more easy listening songs that reflect the feelings that you have for your family. And if I'm coming back and I'm excited, it might be a bit more dance music and a bit more sort of party beats and ready to celebrate.
So it just changes with your mood, with the environment that you have.
I think it'd be a shame to just be fixed into one music.
One band or one music type,
And there's a band that I'm not familiar with, but I heard the song recently, and this is probably old news to others, but I just picked up on it recently, called the Damned, which they're quite a heavy band, but they did a cover of Simon and Garfunkel's song that I can't remember the name of, which makes this whole story not really work. Oh, The Sound of Silence. Okay. And they sing it, very raw, cut back, just his, quite gravelly voice, and then it builds up into a power ballad, and that's another twist on a song that's well known, and people wouldn't expect that type of cover of it, but I like that as well.
Yeah, and just the last question from me, not from the fans. I know you spend a lot of time traveling the world with the F1 circus and doing your work there. So when you're back at home, I mean, I know you have to spend the time with your family, but what's the best way to do that? What's your favorite hobby? What would you do if you had more time with your family at home? What would you go and do most of the time? Yeah,
well, obviously that's an important and pleasurable part of my life, and do I have the work-life balance? Then the answer is clearly not, because I'm going to all the Grand Prix and have done for 20 odd years. But I've got a great wife who did work in Formula One, so she understands the challenges of that, and we're lucky enough to have a son together. I have a stepdaughter who's 18 now. She's left home. She's living in Paris and following her dreams. But just doing normal family things, going for a walk, going for lunch, going out on the boat. I'm lucky enough to be able to have those choices. But just the whole sort of social interaction of the normality of life is what I really enjoy, because I don't have that very often. I fully understand that if I look at my childhood, there was a much more sort of structured Monday to Friday, go to school and all that sort of thing. And I'm fine with that, but equally I do enjoy having a bit more of a relaxed thing as well. So, family and friends is important. I don't have a hobby as such. I would say life is my hobby, because, I think of a hobby as something you would enjoy and want to go and do. And I enjoy life and I want to go and do it, so that's my hobby. Perfect. Thanks a lot. I mean, it's been a great pleasure having you here. Thank you. I know you're leaving this evening. It was a pleasure to have you in Baku. Pleasure to have you here. It's been great. It was a fantastic welcome. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I mean, you have a great sense of humor, which is... it's all scripted. I have someone in my ear telling me what to say. So yeah, and we'll look forward to seeing you during the Grand Prix. I'm sure you're coming for the Grand Prix. Yeah, so, absolutely, yeah. So we'll look forward to see you here back in June. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. Great.